It's so great to be here. Congratulations on the new edition of The Anatomy of Love.
Thank you.
Really.
Thank you.
So 1992, I was putting together my dissertation proposal, and I wanted to study the chemistry of love and bonding. And I was told that if I took that subject on, I'd never graduate. So when I had to put together a dissertation proposal, I had to come up with something I could finish in a reasonable amount of time. So I decided to study couples who were taking a marriage education class, and it turned out that most of the couples were at the brink of divorce. And one of the things I learned in the study was that they weren't having sex, but I included 7 inventories, one of which was the passionate love scale. And my committee and the director tried to convince me to take it out.
Oh my God.
But I did not. So of all of the measures, which included attachment and conflict and aggression and a couple other things, couple typologies, romantic love, passionate love scale was normal. And these couples were average of 14 years of marriage, and they were in big distress. Most of them were not having sex anymore. They were on the brink of divorce. Many of them had been. So the passionate love scale scores were equivalent to the norms that Elaine Hatfield set when she did her study with graduate students or college students. And that really got my attention. And I couldn't figure out how to explain it because there was nothing to talk about. So we really have come a long way. But your book came out
Isn't
around
that
the same
amazing?
time.
I don't think people really know what you just said, how difficult it was for somebody like you and me to even study this.
Right.
You know.
And now we know the neuroscience, the chemistry of romantic love, and it's so, so important. I work with couples all the time, couples at the brink of divorce, and they just have no idea. They say, well, I'm not in love anymore. Well, it's just not that you're not in love, but what are you doing to nurture this bond that you have? Because it's my understanding, and I bet you know better than I, you really can't kill off that romantic love experience. It's got to be saved somewhere in the hippocampus in a file. I call it the red and blue file cabinet. So, but it's saved in there. Those memory traces, like we can't get rid of them.
Right. Well, you know, romantic love is like a sleeping cat. It can be awakened at any minute. And even after many years of marriage, all of a sudden you walk into your kitchen at a party and your husband's kissing somebody else, and boom, all of a sudden you're going to be not only jealous, but in love with them again. I mean, it's there. You just have to trigger it. And now that we know more about the brain, we know how to trigger it. I mean, do novel things together. Novelty drives up the dopamine system in the brain and can push you over that threshold into creating or sustaining feelings of intense romantic love.
So what happens if somebody falls in love with somebody else? So they have been in love with this person, but now they happen to fall in love, you know, by circumstance or whatever.
With somebody else?
With somebody else. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are not in love with that other person. We just can't be in love with 2 people at the same time.
You can feel deeply attached to 2 people at the same time, but not in intense romantic love. I mean, basically one of the main, there's a lot of specific characteristics of romantic love, and one of them is that it's focused on one person. And that's why it evolved. You know, the sex drive evolved to get you out there looking for a whole range of partners. You can have sex with somebody you're not in love with. Romantic love evolved to enable you to focus your mating energy on just one at a time and start that mating process. And this third brain system of attachment evolved to enable you to stick with them at least long enough to raise a child through infancy as a team. So it's there. It's lying in your brain. It's an issue of you want to see if you can focus it on the right person at the right time.
Exactly. Well, so I think that for couples, you know, that want to try to reconcile, like they know they lost their mind temporarily, that attachment bond is pretty powerful and can bring them back. But they still have to go through that torture of letting go of this other one that they've just fallen in love with because of the addiction process.
And
so would you say that they could fall back in love again? Because I tell people that, and they don't often believe me. So
I think it's going to depend. If your partner's turned into an alcoholic and is a gambler and spent all the money and is abusive to your children and is too lazy to, you know, it's not going to work. But if you just basically are bored, but you respect the person, you trust the person, you like the person, they make enough time for you, they make you laugh, and sex is just fine. It's just not that early racing thrill. Yes, I definitely do think that you can trigger that, you know, novelty. you know, and it's not just swinging from chandeliers. I mean, get on your bicycles and go to a different restaurant on Friday night. You know, go to the airport and pick a place you've never been to. This is why people are so romantic on vacations, because the novelty of the vacation spot has driven up the dopamine system, and all of a sudden they're feeling this relaxed, romantic. And once you drive up the dopamine system and trigger romantic love, that triggers the testosterone system and the sex drive. So you can have a little snowball effect. And the reverse can be true. If you have sex with somebody regularly, that can drive, any stimulation of the genitals can drive up the dopamine system and push you over that threshold into falling in love. So I basically think you should have sex 2 to 3 times a week. What would you say?
Every 3 days.
Every 3 days.
There's a shelf life for oxytocin release. That's what I say. And they did it. There's a shelf life for oxytocin release, and it's about 3 days. And that's why women, they really enjoy it. Then they relax, and then they're like, oh, I think I need it again. But men, there was an interesting study about their heart attack rates. And men who had sex more frequently, their blood pressure went down, their hearts functioned better. So every 3 days seemed to work for them too. So believe it or not, we can all get in sync.
Yeah, it's. I do a national study with Match.com called Singles in America. We poll the American population, not the Match population. And I asked this past year, what is the right number of times to have sex a week? Both men and women said 2 to 3 times. Both men and women, men as well as women. And, it can boost all 3 systems. You have sex, it's going to drive up the testosterone system, so you're going to want more sex. It can help you feel feelings of romantic love, and then with, feelings of real attachment. But it's apparently also very good for the immune system. It reduces cholesterol, it reduces cortisol, your bladder, your heart, your lungs, and for God's sakes, your sense of humor, because all kinds of things can happen that could be rather funny.
That's right. So the other question I have is about the sweaty t-shirt research that was taking place, I'm not sure when, but they had the co-eds, the girls, smell these little bags of the guys' t-shirts, and then they analyzed their DNA. Right. But then I heard there was a follow-up study where they kind of matched it to their fathers or something like that they got the DNA. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that.
I vaguely heard about that second study, but I was thinking of a different second. Well, first of all, we women apparently are drawn to men who have a different DNA in that part of the immune system, which is adaptive because you want some variety in, so that your babies are, stronger genetically. But there was a study after that, which I found quite fascinating, which is if a woman is married to a man who has the same genes in that part of the immune system, she's more likely to cheat, and she's more likely to cheat during ovulation, when she's likely to get pregnant by somebody else. And you certainly can work on a marriage and get that romantic love back. Right.
And the interesting thing was the piece about smell, how important smell is. I remember there was a movie called Poison Ivy or something with Batman and Robin, and she got this pheromone thing, and she's spread it out over the 2 of them so she could completely control them and have them do her will. But that whole thing about men and women and smell and how we are attracted at such a primal level, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very primitive smell. But they don't call it love at first smell. They call it love at first sight. And the reason is we spent a good 45 million years in the trees. And if you couldn't see that next branch, you fell to the ground and you died out. So huge parts of the brain are devoted to looking at somebody and not smelling them. So I've often thought that smell really comes in after you've fallen madly in love. Then suddenly you want to wear their t-shirt to bed. You just can't wait to kiss them and smell their collar of their shirt or their hair or any part of them. So I think that it is largely sort of an aphrodisiac that keeps you engaged, but I don't think it's the first thing that draws you to the person. In fact, it might turn you away. I mean, modern world is scared of smells. I mean, we're constantly putting on everything else so that we don't have any natural smells. And but everything plays a role. There's so many factors to why you fall for one person rather than another. As a matter of fact, in this book I talk about all my brain scanning and all this stuff. I had thought that this brain scanning would be the hardest thing that I ever do with my life. but it's been even harder to figure out why you're naturally drawn to one person rather than another, because there's so many cultural forces and there's so many biological forces.
How did you decide to do those long-term couples? Like, whose idea was that on your team? Because somebody had to come up with the idea of doing that and thinking about it.
You mean putting people who are married long-term into
right,
the...
like that had to be somebody, you guys sitting around talking and saying, you know, let's see what happens. And did the results surprise you, or were they what you expected?
Well, people kept coming to me and to other members of the team and saying, I'm still in love with him. I've been married to him 40 years and I'm still in love with him. And we began to sit around and look at each other and say, who knows? Nobody believes that. Why don't we put him in the machine and find out? We really didn't believe it could be true. I mean, I can understand loving somebody, but not in love with. And so we put 17 people, all in their 50s and 60s, into the brain scanner, all married an average of 21 years, most with grown children. And sure enough, we found the same activity in this tiny little factory near the base of the brain that makes dopamine and gives you that elation, giddiness, euphoria, focus, motivation, energy of early, intense romantic love. There was a difference, though, between those who were in love long-term and those who were in love, just fallen in love. And the difference was that in those who had just fallen happily in love, there was a lot of activity in brain regions linked with anxiety. You know, when you've just fallen in love, you're anxious. What did I say that for? Am I too fat? How come I did that? What did he mean by that? You're anxious. Right. Well, after 21 years, you're not doing that anymore. And so what we did is we found activity, new activity in brain regions linked with calm and pain suppression.
So calm and great sex can go together, right?
Calm, great sex, intense romantic love, and feelings of deep attachment. And I really think that if you want a long-term partnership, you need to boost all three of these brain systems: sex drive, romantic love, and feelings of deep attachment. If you want to keep sex alive, have sex. I mean, really, it's just what I call a PGO, a penetrating glimpse of the obvious. And if you want to keep a romantic love alive, you do novel things together. And if you want to keep
and flirt and do all those things.
And throw out your old wash dress, for God's sakes, and you know, don't wear those horrible sweatpants when he comes home from work. You know, keep some of that courtship going. And then for the attachment, you know, just stay in touch. Learn to sleep at least in the beginning in his arms. Walk arm in arm down the street. Kissing drives.
Put him in your arms too.
Put him in your arms.
Melt with that.
Yes, they. Oh, men melt all the time. They.
Helen, it's wonderful talking today, and keep going out and talking to people, sharing your research. Keep researching. Don't stop.
Thank you.